very much.
Currently overseas studying, pursuing her doctorate degree. So, but I'm sure she's tuning in live online, which reminds me of one more thing, which this forum is broadcasted live on Facebook. So to those who are following us online, we welcome you as well. And do feel free to share the Facebook Live to your friends and family so that more people can follow us in the forum tonight. So with that, I think my job here is done. Next up, let us welcome our moderator for tonight, Dr. Khoo, Head and Senior Lecturer at the Department of International and Strategic Studies in Universiti of Malaya. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Khoo has the floor.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you, either here together with us at the Federal Hotel or on the online platform, to this forum on the MACC controversy, corruption, and the case for political financing reform. My name is Ying, and I'll be serving as your moderator for this evening on this timely and exciting topic today. As already mentioned by Veronica in her opening statement, today we have the pleasure to have two prominent invited guests here to talk about the issues of corruptions and so forth. So the format for this evening will be as follows. You'll be first hearing a presentation from Professor Dr. Terence Gomez for around 30 minutes. And this will then follow by the response from Tengku's Razaleigh. Before we will then move to the discussions, and we will then open up for the question and answers from the audience for you, either on the venue here or via the online, in which we will be receiving the questions as well. So with this, without further ado, I would like to welcome the speaker, Dr. Terence Gomez, to deliver his presentations on this topic together with us. All right, Prof, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Khoo. I'd like to also thank the organizer, Agora Society, for inviting me to speak today. In fact, Agora was the first society to ask me to speak after the MACC controversy broke. And I couldn't say no to them. I want to congratulate them for putting this back on the drawing board. This is an issue we need to discuss. Now, I wanted to connect MACC controversy to larger issues, corruption, which is a real pandemic in this country. It's out of control in this country. And I also want to link it to the issue of the financing of politics. Now, let's go to the context. When the MACC controversy broke, I expected that the Prime Minister, Ismail Sabri, would act decisively. In fact, his refusal to act on the controversy is an issue of grave concern. There's been no action really taken on the MACC incident that transpired at the beginning of this year. I am not at liberty to speak about that event because there's now a court case, and I don't want to make that the central issue. That is not the central issue. That is the context in which we begin this discussion on where we are today. What happened? First, the Prime Minister refuses to act decisively on this. And then we hear that the Cabinet said they discussed the pros and cons of this issue. I must say that I was rather flabbergasted to hear this word, pros and cons. This is not an issue about the pros and cons. This is the question about doing the right thing. The right thing is that there is a major controversy involving the head of MACC. What is the government going to do about it? And what has the government done so far? And soon after that event, we had the Transparency International, the 2021 index, which came out and showed that we had fallen, and fallen badly by 5 places. That itself raises another red flag. And again, what was the response to this incident with regards to what happened with the Transparency International Index? We haven't heard any discussion from the government in terms of how they're going to remedy this situation. In fact, the minister, Wan Junaidi, made a statement questioning even the veracity of the index, which I found to be shocking. And to throw into the box, the melting pot, we have the Pandora's Papers. And the Pandora's Papers again exposed a whole group of very prominent politicians. Daim Zainuddin, recently listed as probably the richest man in Malaysia. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, the current president of UMNO. The current finance minister of this country was also mentioned. What has happened so far? And let me remind you that the Prime Minister said, we are going to be very strict about corruption. We are not going to protect anyone. Well, we are still waiting for the action from the Prime Minister. These issues raise the question, where is the political will to curb corruption? Why is there no political will to curb corruption? Now, here's the tragedy. This is not a new issue. This is an issue going back many years. So what I'm going to do today, and what we decided when we were organizing this forum, and I had a discussion with the organizers, I said, the problem with many Malaysians is, one, they don't read, and second, they don't know their history. The knowledge that we Malaysians have of our history is not good on this issue. To show you the severity of the problem that we are confronted with. So let me now take you to what we're going to do. I'm going to take you through history. I'm going to identify the issues that have brought us to this very bad state that we are now in. And then we will talk about how we are going to move forward. The time has come to mount a campaign to stop corruption in this country, which is out of control to my mind. So let me start. Let's go back in history. I know this is very wordy. It takes you, it's a very busy slide. But this is our history. It goes back to 1981. Prior to 1981, when we talked about politics and money, there was talk about UMNO having a secret fund. Books have been, there have been literature on it about a secret fund which they use to fund general and state elections. The money for the elections, where did it come from? It used to come from the tycoons from the MCA. MCA was a party of tycoons. But for me, the defining moment, and this is where I really want to get into, is about money politics within the party. UMNO. And the defining moment, the first defining moment was 1981. In 1981, we saw the beginning of the practice of the use of money during UMNO elections. And it started at the General Assembly. It happened again in 1984. And then it happened again in 1987. In 1987, we had the very famous Team A versus Team B. We are very fortunate to have Tengku Razaleigh here, who can speak about these issues. Team A versus Team B. Here now, we are beginning to see the escalation of the politicization, the monetization of politics. It was also at this time, you will remember, that we had a whole slew of scandals. We had the BFM scandal. We had the Maminco scandal. There were a whole range of scandals already by that time. There was also the politics of giving out contracts, privatization. Who were the beneficiaries of these privatized contracts? The politics of patronage became very strong, and that led to a battle, Team A versus Team B. The policies were not being implemented well. And soon after that, we saw the next sequence of events. UMNO was disbanded. We then see the rise of UMNO Baru. The judiciary is taken to task, and we saw the dismantling of the judiciary. The media was brought down. And in 1987, November, 106 people were arrested under the ISA. One of the darkest moments in our history. That's when democracy, to my mind, really died. The night democracy died. And that's when, since then, the problems began to get worse. Mahathir changed the rules in UMNO Baru. Now, if you want to win the elections, it's not about winning at the General Assembly. You've got to get the votes from the grassroots. That means you have to have money to win support from the grassroots to take on the top leaders. He changed the rules. He made it very difficult for people to mount a challenge. The second issue, which he also facilitated, was the rise of politicians in business. The desire to get politicians to move, to get Bumiputras to move into business led to the move of politicians themselves in business. Prior to this, it was all about UMNO in business. UMNO as a party owned many businesses. they owned NST, they owned hotels, for example. They were very active in construction. And then we saw the rise of what we call crony capitalism. The next defining moment was 1993. Anwar Ibrahim, finance minister, wants to become the deputy prime minister of Malaysia. Although he was told not to do it, he ran. He took on Ghaffar Baba. And at that point, we see money coming in from people who have received contracts into UMNO. That money is then taken down to the grassroots. And then we see the deep monetization of UMNO. The cancer at the top had now spread to the bottom. The word cancer was Mahathir's word. Mahathir used this word cancer to describe the spread of politics, as he put it, in the body politic of UMNO. And in that Wawasan team, we had the likes of Najib Razak, Muhyiddin. These were members of the Wawasan team. And now a person who has now left politics, Muhammad Taib, the chief minister of Selangor. These were the people who became the people who talked about a new language, New Malay, Melayu Baru, Korporat Melayu. That was the language. Mahathir, in fact, said, greed is good. Go into business. The neoliberal system, America, join the stock market, become conglomerates, become global players. All that came to a stop in 1997. In 1997, we had the Asian financial crisis, and then in 1998, we had the conflict between Mahathir versus Anwar. Personalized politics. Anwar is then removed from the system. And then Mahathir does something else. He makes himself finance minister. That was the next stage. Now the prime minister is also the exchequer. The concentration of power in the office of the prime minister. He also controls the finance ministry. I'm moving very quickly in the history, but this history is very important to show you the system that is being created in politics. A system was being created. The system became clearer when Abdullah took charge. Abdullah, when he came, he said, I'm going to change the system. It's infested with corruption and cronyism. I'm going to be a prime minister for all. I'm a prime minister, I remember, with big ears, he said. I will listen to everyone. There was a sense of euphoria. Change had finally come. But Abdullah did not deliver. In fact, a whole new breed of well-connected businessmen emerged under Abdullah. And then we have the defining election, 2008. 2008 was the real defining election. It was in that election, UMNO did very badly, lost their two-thirds majority, lost 5 state governments. Abdullah couldn't believe what had happened, given that he had swept the elections previously, the previous election. This was supposed to be a time when we talked about change. Why? Because not only were we confronted with a political crisis, in 2008 we were also confronted with a global financial crisis, which brought Malaysia to its knees. A double whammy. Politics in a mess, finally elections bringing about some change, hope for change, and in the economy, there was no two ways about it. We had to reform. And then came Najib Razak. And Najib spoke about reforms. He talked about the government transformation plan. He said we need a new economic model. He talked about the ETP, the economic transformation plan. Every day you open the newspaper, there was a new idea. It was a time when we thought, okay, some changes are going to happen. He even made controversial statements. No more affirmative action because it contributes to patronage. These are Najib's words. There was a sense of feeling that change may be imminent. When Najib came to power, he had already numerous allegations of scandals behind him. He was not a very popular choice. When the poll was taken as to his popularity, it was only about 30%. Soon after he came to power, he announced a range of reforms. After 1 year, a popularity poll was taken, it had shot up to 70%. Such was the desire for change. He himself, and Abdullah said it when he spoke, when Abdullah handed over power, he said, we have to stop money politics. It is undermining UMNO. UMNO lost badly because of money politics. Najib himself proposed a reform on political financing, to reform political financing. And then he quickly changed. Within a quick span of time, he said no more privatization, affirmative action became market-friendly affirmative action, and all talk about reforming money politics went out the window. What brought about this change? Why did he change? Because Najib suddenly realized he was sitting on a gold mine. He was sitting on a world called the GLC world, which gave him enormous power. And remember this, like Mahathir, Najib was also the finance minister, as well as the prime minister. In 2013, he went into election promising so many things. He thought he could win that election and win it big. And to his horror, he lost big. 2013 was a shock for him. It was also interesting that he lost badly because 2013 was an election. I know I went to every state. I went to every state in the general election. I visited every state. And what shocked me in this general election was the volume of money that was being spent on the ground. Never before in my research of politics in this country, visiting constituencies during a general election, never before had I seen this kind of money. And politicians were talking about it too, opposition. They were talking about it too. They were saying, where is all this money coming from? No one knew. And then 2 years later, in 2015, we found out. The 1MDB scandal broke. And Najib confirmed it. The money that was used in the 2013 election came from 1MDB. A massive volume of foreign funds from the Middle East was now part of our political system. And it was not just the Middle East. Hong Kong, we heard through Hong Kong, money had flowed into Sabah. Musa Aman, court case there too on this. A lot of money was coming from abroad into Malaysian politics. Money politics had gone international. This was the crisis. This was a moment of crisis. But what was also interesting at that time was the GLC world. 1MDB exposed that GLC world, that shadow economy, that shadow corporate sector that was so pervasive. We wrote a book on this, my team and I. It's called Minister of Finance Incorporated. Because we said it's not just 1MDB, there's a huge world out there of many GLCs, which is where the politicians were getting their money from. When they exposed 1MDB, Najib said, I'm going to form a special committee to introduce reforms for money politics, political financing. I'm going to introduce a Political Financing Act. But he said, while I introduce the reforms for the financing of politics, it will be a law, I'll introduce a law, but I will not introduce institutional reforms. You can have a law, but I'm going to keep the institutions under my control. What is the point of having a law if the institutions have no autonomy? Anyway, there was a proposal for the law. Meanwhile, NGOs had come together to come up with their own proposals. Let me remind you again, in 2008, when Najib came to power and he said, we're going to stop money politics, NGOs came together, led by Transparency International, and they came up with a book on the reform of politics. A 20-point memorandum was given to the government to reform money politics. There was no acceptance of this from Najib. There was no acceptance of this even from the opposition. Even the opposition said no because, as they put it to us, we have control now of 4 or 5 state governments. We are also now getting funding. So there was no support. In 2008, when we first started this campaign on reforming the financing of politics, there was no support. And it ended. It ended very quickly. Again, it happened after 1MDB. Again, the NGOs came together. The government had its own recommendations, which was given. NGOs came together, and again they gave even more detailed recommendations on what the law should look like. And guess what happened? No takers from the opposition side as well as from the government side. What was going on here? How badly had money politics now infested the entire political system to the point that no political party was willing to support this? That was where we were at that time. And then the government fell. 2018, a new Malaysia. And in the manifesto, Pakatan said very clearly they're going to reform money politics. They said, we're going to introduce an act. Well, they had 2 years to do it, and we didn't see it. What took so long? After all the recommendations were there. The law, as from what I heard, was nearly ready. It's just a matter of taking it to Parliament and making it law. And if you don't reform money politics, you're going to get corruption. That was the point. But they refused to listen. That's our history. That's our history that I'm putting to you today. You must know this history to understand why today we are in the mess that we are in today. And then Pakatan fell. Promised much, delivered little, and we had a new party in power. And since then, what have we seen? Okay, we had the court cases. Najib, the court cluster as they are called, Najib, Adnan, Zahid. Okay, there was some court cases, very good, action was taken. The court cases were an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener. The volume of money, donations they were called, the volume of money that were given to politicians that had seeped into the political system was stupendous. Tengku Adnan in court said, 2 million is pocket change to me. I'm quoting him. He said it. 2 million is pocket change. What kind of money are we talking about? Go and read the court cases. C4 did a study on politics of donations and foundations where we have listed this. The volume of money was stupendous. And here I'm not even talking about the 2.6 billion ringgit that went into the accounts of politicians, which was used in the 2018 election. And what happened since then? The collapse of the system, a dysfunctional political system, party hopping, individuals hopping from one party to another, and then we see parties hopping from one coalition to another. It was bad enough that politicians are hopping, now we have parties hopping. And coalition after coalitions being formed, to the point we can't keep track of these politicians. And what they are doing. So today, let me move on quickly. I've given you all your history, a quick history of over 40 years. Books have been written on this. Please read those books to come up to speed, to understand our history so that we know how to move forward. You cannot move forward unless you know your history. Let's look at today. We have a governance crisis. The worst of two worlds, as I call it. The world of Mahathir Mohamad and the world of Najib Razak. Mahathir, when he came to power, he started the politics of patronage. Najib took it to another level. Najib's administration was characterized by serious corruption. We even finally got the word kleptocracy, to our great embarrassment. Throughout the world, we were known as a kleptocracy. Kleptocracy means you plunder from the state and you take the money and you put it elsewhere, outside the country. Allegations of money laundering. Mahathir, while we may argue that he had patronage in his blood which drove his politics, he also had a developmental idea. He wanted to industrialize Malaysia. He wanted to pick winners. And he picked some winners. Halim Saad, Tajuddin Ramli, Samshuddin Abu Hassan. They were known as Dimes boys. They were groomed by Dimes Zainuddin. They didn't go far. Much of the assets from UMNO were allegedly also transferred to these people. And they collapsed after 1997. But there was another group of people who also got concessions from the government who did well with them. YTL with the IPPP, the power generation plants, did well. Ananda Krishnan did very well with Maxis and Astro. Started from scratch. Look at Astro and Maxis. Developmental. On Najib's side, however, we have the infamous Jolo. speculative, making silly movies, buying yachts and property all over the world. Nothing productive. So there's this talk about developmental corruption and degenerative corruption, the difference between the two. Do they both still prevail in the country? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Both types of corruption still prevail in the country. The thing has gone off. Okay, it's back. Mahathir loved the corporate sector. Mahathir and Dime loved the corporate sector. Never before in our history had we seen a prime minister who was so enamored by business. And they indulged very much in the corporate sector. These crony capitalists that came up were key players in the corporate sector. Najib, on the other hand, was not interested. The use of foreign firms, getting money from abroad, using foreign mechanisms to raise funds, and then bringing it back into the country. And in terms of money, the money went into UMNO's accounts. There was an UMNO account held by the president, the deputy president, the secretary general, and the treasurer. And then we have money, in Najib's case, going into his personal account. You're seeing differences. Do these two systems prevail? Yes, everything that I'm describing to you still prevails. In terms of ownership of firms, Mahathir didn't mind. Let it be widely held. There were many cronies. There's a whole list of them. We can go through the list. I've published a list of these cronies that emerged during that period. And it was not just Mahathir. Other politicians who came up also had their own list. But for Najib, he was more interested in GLCs. Because as finance minister, he controlled the GLCs. He controlled the GLICs. Minister of Finance Incorporated, the pension fund, which was implicated in the 1MDB scandal. He controlled Khazanah. He controlled EPF. He controlled Tabung Haji. These were all under his control. Many of them were implicated in scandals. I'll show you more later. The other issue which we must talk about, linking corporate politics with public policies. Mahathir had an agenda, BCIC, Bumiputra Commercial and Industrial Community, create a new breed of Bumiputra business people. That was his vision. He talked about heavy industrialization, Proton, the vendor system to create SMEs owned by Bumiputras. That was his vision. Privatization, use privatization to create these conglomerates. When it comes to Najib, there was no such link. You could see no link between corporate politics and public policies. So we see two systems in play by two different prime ministers, created by them, but still remaining part of the system. Today, what do we have? Politicians in business, we have politicians in business, we have cronyism, we have rent-seeking, we have corruption, created during Mahathir's time, festering until today. Now what do we have? How is this manifesting itself? The enormous use of money during federal and state elections. If those of you had gone to Johor, you'd probably have seen that too. But forget Johor. Look at the last general election. How much money was used in the last general election? Mahathir used the word, cash is king. Remember? Cash is king. Where is all this money coming from? So, let me show you. Where is all this money coming from? Here you are. I kept saying GLC, GLC. This is the GLC world controlled by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister under Najib. So here you see, at the center you have the Minister of Finance Incorporated, and here I call just the big four, ministries in business, Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister's Department, the Ministry of Rural Development. Ministry of Rural Development is very important because through the Ministry of Rural Development, you can reach the grassroots. The gerrymandering and the malapportionment is so bad that if you want to win the elections, you just get the rural constituencies, you win the elections. Enough. How do you control them? The Ministry of Rural Development. And always the Ministry of Rural Development is held by a senior minister, a senior UMNO minister. This was the world. In purple is all the companies they created. You can see here Mara, you can see Felda, you can see Petronas, all under his control. all implicated in scandals. You all remember the Felda scandal. You all remember the Mara scandal. And was Tabung Haji abused? Was KWAP abused? There, all here. All controlled ultimately by the Minister of Finance, who is also the Prime Minister. Mahathir called this the monster. During the last campaign, he referred to this as the monster. And we must reform this system. What happened when Pakatan came to power? Was the system reformed? Was there any talk about this? After all, it was Mahathir who said, this is a monster which is causing all the contribution and the cash is king. This is where the cash is coming from. Do you know all the people sitting as directors in all those purple nodes, those are companies, get a stipend, get a salary as directors? How much money is being wasted? And that money is not all going into their pocket. That money also goes into the political system. And that exacerbates corruption, rent-seeking. And what did Muhyiddin say when he became Prime Minister? He said, we got to get people to hop. How do we get them to do it? Give them GLC directorships. Didn't he say that? I'm just quoting him. Give them GLC directorships. And when he created the largest cabinet we have seen, for those who didn't get cabinet appointments, he made them chairman or senior directors of all these GLCs, for which they were getting additional income at a time when we were confronted with a pandemic and having no income. Where was the political will to reform this? Now you know how corruption became so bad. Meanwhile, what was the opposition doing? Why didn't they do anything? So let me tell you why. Penang, DAP. DAP controls Penang. They have a GLC system in Penang too. We have published this, it's out there, you can see it for yourself. The report is out. So here at the heart of it, you see Chief Minister Incorporated, holding company. Like at federal level, we have Minister of Finance Incorporated. Here we have Chief Minister Incorporated, with the Chief Minister controlling that holding company, which controls the system. Same system. Selangor, PKR. Same system. Smaller. Politicians also as directors. This is 2017, before the election. But there you are. Do they want to change it? They don't want to change it. Why should they change it? This is also a source of revenue for them. Their directors are politicians too. And let's move on. Kelantan, PAS. PAS too has it. This is our mapping of Kelantan. Menteri Besar Incorporated at the center. And the nodes at the in the circles are politicians who are all directors, who are all earning a stipend. This is our system. This is the point. Let me stress this. In 2018, when we had the general election, we had 13 state governments. 8 different parties controlled the 13 state governments. That means 8 different parties had control over a GLC system at the state level. Were they willing to give it up? Why do you think there is no political will to stop this? Now you know. Now you know. So what are we going to do now? The reasons for reforms. Now I'm taking you to where we are today. Money is a key feature of our political system. I'm sorry, that's it. How can money be a key feature of our political system? It's about policies, values, principles. It's about eradicating poverty, industrialization, bringing about greater equality, not money. And look at the volume of money, the monetization of money, it has just grown. Money is seeping into the political system. I mentioned the court cluster. Look at the volume of money there. Our political culture today is characterized by vote buying, party hopping, rent seeking. That's our political culture. Are we proud of this political culture? The second issue, unequal access. It's bad enough we have that, but the way the money is distributed is unequal. Some have more than others. And that is so clearly manifested in general and state elections. You saw recently in Johor, Muda was complaining they have no money. They can't compete. New parties want to come in, they can't compete. Also, there's this issue of within the party. Do you know how difficult it is for young people to climb the UMNO hierarchy? UMNO is a party of warlords. The warlords control the entire political system at the grassroots level. You want to challenge, you want to move up, you want to become a division head, a branch leader, a division head, you have to spend a lot of money. And you don't have the money. How many young people are there in UMNO today? Why is it young people cannot move up? They cannot challenge the warlords. Everything I'm saying, we have Tengku Razaleigh to verify or disprove. That's why I'm happy Tengku Razaleigh is here. You don't have to take my word for it. I accept the fact I may be wrong. After all, I'm not an UMNO member. I don't know the system. I'm not an actor. That's why I am grateful Tengku Razaleigh is here. We can have a dialogue about this. Today, before I came, I opened the news and I saw UMNO youth. They were saying they want to introduce the Political Financing Act. What is this? UMNO youth, women's wing, is it? Who said they want Political Financing Act immediately. Why? Because the young are disenfranchised. The young are marginalized. They have no place. Hard to climb unless you have money. And my sincere hope is the young don't get corrupted by money politics. Then we are all doomed. The third issue, which I want to get into, is covert funding. I showed you all the GLC system. When we came up with the book, Minister of Finance Incorporated, the book was given to Mahathir. It was given to opposition party members. I thought during the campaign, they'll take the book and go to town along with 1MDB, but nobody discussed the book. Nobody. Why did we do all this work? We thought we did a great service to the nation by coming out with that book. But it was not discussed, even though Mahathir called the system a monster. Why? Now you know. Because at the state level too, they were doing it. They can be exposed at the state level too. Which brings me to the next point. Legislation. We don't have the legislation. You saw the cases in court. How did they get off? Donations. There's no law to prevent politicians from getting donations. That itself was a red flag that we have to change the law. Because the judges, whatever it is, must follow the law. What is stipulated in the law. A good defense? Maybe, but that's the case now. Donations, it's true. Politicians can get donations. And that's why, as I said, with C4, we did another study called Foundations and Donations. That's the way in which they get the money. The law must be changed. Then we have the issue of institutions devoid of autonomy. How autonomous are our institutions? How autonomous is the EC? How autonomous is the MACC, the SC? Have they devolved power to these institutions to give them that autonomy so that they can act without fear or favor? No. They're all controlled by the executive arm of the government. How can the executive arm of the government control these institutions? Already he's controlling the economy. The executive arm of government is controlling the economy through the GLC system. They're also controlling the institutions which are the regulators. The cabinet is so powerful. That is our system, which they do not want to change. And then we have money politics within the party. Factionalism. Serious factionalism in all parties. In all parties. I'm not saying that it's only UMNO. All parties have serious factionalism. Look at PKR. Serious factionalism there too. And don't tell me there's no factionalism in DAP or PAS. So, money, the key feature. If factionalism is caused by differences of opinion on policies, that's okay, you know. That's okay. But if factionalism is caused because of differences on money and access to money, then that's a problem. So this brings me to my last point, the key issues today.
Sorry, 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm done. This is my last slide. What are our problems? We started off with patronage. We moved into corruption. Patronage was legitimized by the policy. There is a policy, the new economic policy allows for the practice of patronage, where you can give contracts because the policy stipulates that to rectify social injustices. That's okay. But when it's abuse of power, then you get corruption. When it goes to the cartels, when it goes to the well-connected, then it's abuse of power. And we got that. That's why we got crony capitalism. And then from there we got kleptocracy. That's even worse. Now it's really bad. Money is, before at least swirling around in the country, some projects do get done. The money gets back into the system. But kleptocracy means the money is taken out of the system and sent abroad, and you never see it again. A complete waste of the money, and it is in no way contributing in any way to economic development in the country. And today we are back to patronage. The patronage system is back in play in this country. Second, the big problem, no political will to eradicate corruption. I thought with the MACC scandal, if the MACC already has these allegations against it, surely the politicians must act. Surely the Prime Minister now must say enough is enough, he just got to do something. But no, now you know why. Corruption implicates practically, from what I can see, all parties. There's a few parties who, of course, are out of the system, they're not part of the power. But look at how all parties seem to be implicated in this. MACC, it's under question. Something must be done to inspire public confidence if you are really to act against corruption. And what about the other institutions? Securities Commission, Bank Negara, police. The previous IGP has already raised questions about the police. That's also now in the news. And now we have a new problem. Businessmen are entering politics. Powerful businessmen are entering politics, what we call checkbook politics. Bintulu, Jalao, Semangat, Bukit Gantang. I'm just naming 4 constituencies run by prominent business people, still in business or formerly in business. These are just 4. How many more prominent business tycoons are going to enter into our political system as politicians? Is it happening in Muda? Social response. Given this crisis, what do? We have to do it. It has to be NGOs. It has to be society. If we do not stand up now and say enough is enough and put the pressure on the politicians, starting with the Prime Minister, to bring about the reforms, this is going to kill our economy. We are seeing the worst of 2 worlds now coming together, being implicated in terms of how it is functioning in our economy. And this is not good, considering that we have a pandemic to deal with. And at the heart of the pandemic, as the Finance Minister Tengku said, when the pandemic first broke, how are you going to save the economy? He said, I'm going to use the government ecosystem. What did he mean? I'm going to use the GLCs. The banks, moratorium on loans. Tenaga, cut down on the rates for electricity supply. Telecommunications, cut down the rates so that you all can use your internet even more, which we needed to do. We're all stuck at home. The GLC can be a wonderful tool to save the economy if they use it properly, as they already showed they can, but they continue to abuse it. So what are our key demands? First, introduce the Political Financing Act immediately, as soon as possible. Stop dilly-dallying on this. The act is ready. If we do not have the PFA, the Political Financing Act, be prepared. We cannot move to solve corruption issues. There are 2 very closely interconnected issues. Start with the PFA, then we start moving with anti-corruption activities. All parties must disclose their sources of financing. All of them must disclose their funding. If we have reached that point, where are you getting this money? And this I'm saying not only annually, but also specifically before federal and state elections. And this issue of revolving door refers to the phenomenon of businessmen coming into politics, then going back into business, the revolving door phenomenon. And then we have this issue of secret funds. Ban secret funds, donations, expose this nonsense about donations, put a stop to this, bring it out into the light. Foreign funding, what are we going to do with it? I say no to foreign funding. I don't want any foreign funding. And stop cash payments. During elections, what did they do? They give out cash. Make that illegal. All payments must be digital anyway. Everything's digital now anyway. These are just some, just to get us going, to talk, to begin the talk. A lot more is required. And I can tell you the work has already been done in terms of what needs to be done. But there is no political will by any of the politicians that we have at the federal or state level to fight for this campaign to eradicate corruption in this country. That's why we now have to step in. The NGOs have to act together to bring an end to this money politics that is totally embedded now in our political system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Terence, for this informative and interesting talk where Dr. Terence walked us through the histories of the politics of money, highlighting some of the key issues and also put up a few of the key demands that what should we do next. Now, I would like to invite Tengku to provide his response to the presentations delivered by Dr. Terence just now. Tengku, so do you agree with what Dr. Terence has presented and also provide some of your insights with this topic as well? The floor is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Datuk Khoo, Dr. Gomez, and everyone present. I'm very happy and honored to be given this opportunity to speak with you on this very controversial and important subject. After 64 years of independence, we are facing these problems. And I must admit that I agree with most of the things that Dr. Gomez have laid out before you. And perhaps he has seen it from his own perspective, not from the way I look at it. But I don't share with all those bad things that they have been involving themselves in. But I must add here that we are in a bad mess, politically and financially. And I must also add that the problem is not so much about financing or inability to manage our economic problems. But I think the lack of leadership is the biggest problem we face. I don't think we have a leader that could rally around people to give him the strength and support in order to introduce reforms that could have effect on all those problems that we face. For instance, Dr. Gomez mentioned about political funding. In fact, I must inform Dr. Gomez and all of you, it was I who started the political funding. But it was a fund that was created to finance elections and by-elections. And it is separate from the general funding because it was not meant to be used for ordinary financing of political activities. These funds are accumulated over time in order to finance elections and by-elections. And they are disclosed to members at the end of the election period. And of course, the financing of any by-election or general elections are in accordance with the laws laid down by the country. So I don't think there is anything wrong with it. But what became a problem, I noticed, was when politicians entrusted with collecting funds for this political funding, instead of putting into the fund, put it in their pockets. And this amount of money is built up over time. And then you have this creation of warlords, which attempt to control the political machinery at their end. Then we have infighting, because each try to outdo the other in order to raise funds, and they get involved in all kinds of nefarious activities, including contracts which are sold by working on the margins, by letting other subcontractors to take off such contracts from them. And it goes on and on and on. And another entrant comes in bidding for the place, again complicates the issue and issue more contracts and more subcontracts. But you can't blame on these politicians alone. It's the funders, the givers are also the culprits. They are the people who would buy off these contracts and give them the margin. And there's so many of them, not just within the party, but outside of the party, who came along to finance these contracts or the subcontracts. And that complicates the issue because they're tied on legally again. It's very difficult to break those contracts. But I support this action by all of you to have a law governing political financing. But you have to be very careful what you do here, because once you get it into the law, then it's very difficult to police and even control it, because it will be within the system again. And it's very difficult for you to even suggest amendments to such a law. I like to suggest here, when you come to political financing, that we should stop collecting our money for political funding. I like to suggest that we have a tax, something like the poll tax, on the people to fund political activities, depending on the strength of the party and the reach each political party or politician has on the constituents. And in that sense, it's not tied to any obligatory contracts or promise that would essentially embarrass the people who were to negotiate for such a deal or a contract. And in such a manner, you will therefore free the politician as well as the contractor from having to be answerable for the amount of money that is being used for a given contract. And this fund should be managed at the expense of the political parties concerned by the Election Commission, so that earlier in the day, they would have to submit, under the law, a proposal, an estimate of some kind, as to how much they would need to spend for political activities or for a by-election or an election within a general election. In such a manner, you could then police the amount of money that will be used and how the money is obtained in the first place. Any additional sum of money expended over and beyond what was estimated will be suspect. And the candidate concerned, even if he wins, could be disqualified. Or the funder or the contractor could be penalized, taken to court and charged for abusing the privilege that was given under the law. In that sense, I think you could control to a certain extent. But I remember one prominent Japanese leader who visited us in the 70s, warning us that the problem that we will face when we become over-democratized will be the problem of political funding. He said, after the war, Japan spent hundreds of millions of yen to finance the election of officials within the party, as well as to finance not only by-elections, but also general elections. And the amount of money spent is rising. Each year, each time we face an election, the amount double, if not quadruple. And he wondered how the politicians in the future are going to match the kind of costs that they will have to face. This is a real problem that he posed to all of us who had the opportunity to discuss things with him. But he said, Malaysia will soon face this problem because it's not only something that we experience in Japan, but it's experienced all over. In America, you have what we call a lobby system. But actually, it's the same thing. People coming in, group of lawyers representing suppliers of things to the government supply, or offering equipments for the government to consider and buy, purely lobbying for the government to acquire their products. And there's a lot of money being spent to promote such a sale to government agencies. And who knows how much money passed hands during those during those contracts. And they're all over the world. These lobbyists not just confine themselves to work within the Congress, but also come to our parts of the world. And we inherit this system. But some others improve on the system and made it worse. And that's why we are in a rut like this, Dr. Gomez. But these are man-made systems, and I suppose we can always overcome them through further thinking and further explorations in order to curb such abuses. Apart from that, I also remember that a lot of money cannot be accounted for. I remember when I started Petronas years back, we never thought we were going to amass a lot of money. But I did with my team a projection of how much money we're going to make, on the assumption that the demand for oil or crude oil was going to be on the increase, depending on developments in the world. Of course, the demand for equipments with technological progress will always increase. Similarly, production of goods and services will also increase. And because of that, we projected that there will always be shortage of supply of oil, because OPEC and OPEC will always come in together with the Soviet Union at that time to ensure that they will manipulate the price. And of course, the people who manage the stockpile in Japan, in the United States, will ensure that they will try to stabilize or spoil the arrangement in the market. So we here, being a very small producer, not a member of OPEC or OPEC, was following this trend and were projecting that we will be making a lot of money. At one time when the oil price hit nearly $140 a barrel, we were making nearly 90 billion ringgit net per year. And imagine if we had put aside half of that profits that were made from the sale of oil, we could have in reserve some $1 trillion, enough to provide for each citizen of the country within $4 to $7 million in their kitty. But we missed that opportunity. But now with the Ukrainian and the Russian war, there is a possibility that the oil price will spike again. And there is an opportunity, if we are prudent enough, to set aside a portion of this and create a kind of a reserve that could not be touched by the government as they have done in the past without the approval of Parliament, at least 2/3 approval, or with the consent, say, of the Rulers' Conference. In that way, we will be able to build up a reserve that will be good for education, health, welfare needs, and whatever, including scientific research. So there are ways that we can do, but this corruption problem is going to be with us for some time. And it's not going to be easy to get rid of it. They say prostitution started as an old profession. I don't know about corruption, but when the two men started buying and selling, then there was an element of corruption, I'm sure. But it is there, and we must find a way to stop this cancer, as Dr. Gomez said a word described by Dr. Mahathir when he was lamenting on money politics. But money politics is the problem that have given rise to corruption in political organizations and matters touched by political organizations. And I think if you are able to plant a spy in every department or every space in our society, probably it could help minimize or reduce the amount of corruption taking place. I'm just trying to use an example which we employ. For instance, in the inland revenue, we have so many of these spies, even watching how many bowl of mee soup or fried rice are being sold by hawkers who are licensed by the city hall or town councils, because these people avoid paying tax. And we calculate all this, and we come to a rough figure before we present the bill to them. Somehow or other, we are able to collect some form of taxes from these people who have made a lot of money, and they also have escaped having to pay tax from the income that they receive. I think we have to employ various means to stop this from becoming worse than what we experience today. I think I'm going to stop there and let you do the talking. And I'll try to explain what is still in doubt in your mind on matters that were raised by Dr. Gomez shortly just now. I will now thank you for giving me your ears to what I've said briefly here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tengku, for sharing your insights here. I think following up with the response by Tengku, you have mentioned quite a bit about the political funding, in which you mentioned you were introducing that political funding. And then when I reflected back with Dr. Terence, one of the key demands that you listed is to ban secret funds, the donation, and the foreign funding. So because of the time constraint just now, you did not manage to actually explore into that in details. So I was wondering that how would you respond to what Tengku has mentioned, that Tengku has some reservations when it comes to political fundings. So I would like to ask you, when you say to ban the secret funds and the foreign funding, are you saying a total ban, or should there be a cap of how much political donation or funding is legally allowed? Can you explore a little bit more on that?
Well, we have discussed this in our recommendations. And in our recommendations, we are very clear. There's a difference between the funds within the party's accounts, and that is in the domain of the party. And how they use it, of course, should be with the registrar of companies. Now, we feel that parties should not be listed under the registrar of societies. They should be under an independent body, for example, say the Election Commission. And we also feel that there should be regular monitoring of the sources of funds that go into the party. Now, we made it very clear. We want to support political parties. We want to make sure they have sufficient money, because doing political activities is not cheap. They need money. But there must be legitimate sources of financing, including we propose public funding. It's the role of the government to support political parties because they're part of the democratic system. That is our recommendation. We want to help political parties. We want to introduce a mechanism where we can channel funds to them which are legitimate, which will help them do their political work. And then we get a thriving democracy. On the other hand, there's the other part, how much money is spent during elections, general and state. There we have another set of recommendations. And we do have a cap. We do have a cap on income. We do have a cap on expenditure. We've even tabulated how you do it, because in rural areas, for example, if you go to Kelantan, if you go to Sarawak, if you want to go to rural areas in Sarawak, do you know how difficult it is to go to the rural areas in Sarawak? Exactly, or plane or whatever, a boat usually. So basically what that means is the volume of money they spend to do their constituency work is not enough. 50,000 or 100,000 is just not enough. So we have to look at those things. So we are not making universal general recommendations. We have very detailed recommendations for that.
I spend 50,000 per visit to my constituency.
There you are.
which is the most rural of the constituencies in Peninsula Malaysia.
So this is the point. The volume of money that is required by politicians to do constituency work
You get only 6,000 from Parliament.
is very limited. It no way matches what you need on the ground. But we need to come up with a system which is fair so that politicians can do their constituency work, to serve their constituency well. But at the same time, there must be a cap on how much. Our primary concern is who are the sources of funding. Tengku Razaleigh said it very well. Who's the giver? Are the givers legitimate? Are they transparent? Do we know who they are? Is it in the public domain? This is what we want.
Terence. Tengku, in response to Dr. Terence's answer, thinking that how much do the politicians need when it comes to the issues that have raised by Dr. Terence in terms of, just now you mentioned the amount. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that?
You can't have a hard and fast rule. You can't have a hard and fast rule on this because constituencies vary. The number of voters also vary. And the likes and dislikes by the voters also vary. Their needs and their demands are different in a given constituency. I know this because I go all over the country. And I have sampled the problems of some of the people in the urban areas, as well as in the darkest corner of Sarawak or Sabah. I've been all over these places. But you cannot say X dollars is enough for a constituency. You cannot, because they're different situations. And the different needs and the different requirements expect different treatment. Very difficult. It's not going to be easy for the government or parliament to decide on this kind of factors. And it depends on how the political leadership lead them, whether they can discipline these members of parliament or state assemblymen as to their needs. Some of them bluff, some of them cheat, but I don't know to what extent. But I think it's the political leadership who must be able to determine what should be a fair and reasonable estimate to be considered.
Let's put it in a way that just now you highlight about the lack of leadership is one of the issues that we face today. Let's put it in a situation that if you were the Prime Minister of Malaysia, what kind of suggestions that you think you would like to recommend so that we can curb these problems?
You're asking me to give you an impossible answer. It's very difficult.
Okay, so it still depends on the size of the constituency that you mentioned and so forth. Okay, so that means you recognize that and acknowledge that there's a challenge here, that apart from the lack of the leaderships, there's also these issues of the institutional failures that you noticed?
No, I'm not going to answer your question directly, but as I mentioned in my short briefing just now, I think the whole problem we face here is a problem of political leadership. If we have a political leader that is respected, better still revered, then you will minimize these problems. But if the political leader is someone who is a bullshitter and who's a fellow who doesn't give two hoots about what goes wrong in society, then you're going to have these kind of problems. But if you have a very strong personality with very, very firm conviction about the people, then you may get people like Tengku Abdul Rahman, you know, who is not seen very much with the crowds, but he could pull the lever, and people would run to him in obeisance, and will not repeat what wrong they have done. And that is the measure of respect, the measure of obedience they can demonstrate to a leader such as Tengku Abdul Rahman. But how many are there? Even in UK, you've heard during Margaret, not Margaret Thatcher, the previous lady Prime Minister's time, people cheated on the buying of curtains. The MPs cheated on the allocation that was given to them. And this created a hue and cry in Parliament and in the papers. But all these things depends on how much leadership you exercise. If you don't know how to exercise leadership, then you are going to have a real big problem, as you do encounter now.
Okay. Thank you, Tengku. Before I open up for the question and answers, I have received one question online that is actually quite related to what we have discussed by Lim Yu Chen. So the question is like this. Najib is so popular nowadays and he's widely seen as bringing in votes for BN in Johor state election. However, the question that related to what we have discussed is that we talk about the leadership. However, the other issues is that why are there still Malaysians who accepted convicted corrupt leaders in your point of view, Tengku? Yes. Yeah. The question is, we talk about leadership, but why are there still Malaysians who accepted convicted corrupt leaders or any corrupted leaders, you know?
I think it's us.
Yeah.
We're too polite. We're too polite. We even say, very well, thank you very much, to a wrong thing that they have done. We shouldn't be. If we are really principled, what is wrong is wrong. What is right is right. You have to respect that. And when you do that, I think people will respect you.
Right.
And similarly, the people who are punished for the wrong that they have done will never want to repeat it again.
Right.
And that will be an exemplary action that will be respected and upheld by others as well.
Right. Okay. Terence, would you like to respond as well to the same question?
I'd like to give a response to that. If you look at the history of countries that have been under authoritarian rule for a long time, and when they make a transition to democracy, history has shown us during that period from this transition from long-term authoritarian rule to democracy, it is always characterized by chaos. There'll always be problems. Look at Philippines when Marcos fell. There were so many problems under Corazon Aquino during a time of even coups there and counter coups and so on. It took them time to stabilize the system and consolidate democracy. If you look at Indonesia, when Suharto fell, there was a period where there was constant change of leadership. The presidents changed very often. Now we have to think about that. We had 2 years, Pakatan was not given sufficient time. They didn't, unfortunately, use that time properly to consolidate democracy, and then they fell. Secondly, when they fell, we also were hit by an unprecedented pandemic, a health pandemic. So we were now hit with public policies which had to be new to address people who were suffering on the ground. We also had to deal with the political crisis. If you ask me, on the minds of people, what they wanted were public policies to address their problems, serious problems, and what they were confronted with was chaos. So my reading of the election results is not, I don't think they really voted for Barisan Nasional. After all, look at the volume of votes the Barisan got. Was it 30% of the popular vote? They won because of our political system is first past the post, which allowed them to win because we had these multi-cornered fights and all the opposition were not willing to cooperate, and multi-cornered fights helped the Barisan Nasional. So let's be clear in terms of the popular what happened. Let's also be clear about what people are thinking. People on the ground are very worried about what's happening in the economy, to their lives. Where are the public policies to help them? And we have a chaotic political system. So let's put all this in context when we think about the electorate and how they vote too, rather than just simplistically saying they won because they had Najib was the man on the ground. I don't think it's so simple.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Terence. Before I go back to you, Tengku, I'm going to open up the floor for the question and answers. If anyone here or via online would like to ask questions to either Dr. Terence or Tengku, please raise your hand and we will pass your mic there. And you may ask your question either in English or Bahasa. So with that in mind, we ask that your question to be short and provide your name and, if possible, your affiliation as well. So if anyone here would like to ask any questions. Yeah.
Hello, hi. My name is Aisha. I'm a lecturer from Faculty of Medicine, UM. I'm here actually in support of Professor Terence Gomez. So I have a question each, one for Professor Gomez and the other one for Tengku. My first question was that, excellent lecture, by the way. You had a slide there and you kept on banging on how NGOs should be the ones making the current government in power accountable for their actions. All right, so I'm sure there's too many NGOs in Malaysia to talk about.
That's right.
I have my own support group, which I look after children with my condition, spina bifida. And I do not trust the NGO which supposedly represents people with spina bifida, for example, in our country. And so, therefore, I have my own separate support system. So I'm curious as to how on earth could you possibly make those NGOs accountable? I mean, sorry, how do the NGOs make the government in power at that particular time accountable for their actions? Okay, that's question for Professor Gomez. Second question for Tengku. Assalamualaikum. My question is, Tengku, so you had actually touched a raw nerve. You mentioned about how we should be capitalizing on the current state of the world in order to make more money for Malaysians, and that's really, something that really touches my heart, because I find that the top-down instructions now, especially for people in academia, is that, oh, you got to make money. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what you teach, you have to make money. All right, so my thing in regards to that, because you specifically mentioned that if Malaysia, capitalizes on this, making money for the people, then we will be able to fund, all the relevant research funding. And it's very sad when you think about so many Malaysians being out there and doing fantastically well, in Harvard, in Cambridge, in Oxford. But yet, I do think that I am surrounded by highly intelligent people, but research funding is not something which is equitable in our country. I'm sorry to say, the system of patronage is extreme, it's alive and well, and even more so now with the lack of research funding. So I'm just wondering, for the past 61 years, what on earth have our leaders been doing? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisha. Tengku, would you like to respond first? Or, yeah.
Thank you very much. Actually, when I touch on this subject, it's a subject that is very close to my heart. When I was asked to start Petronas, or I came with the idea to start Petronas, the first thing that struck me was how much money you can make out of oil. And I thought there will be enough money to pay for the needs of our people. And true enough, when the crude oil price hit $130, $140 a barrel, there's a lot of money that you can put in reserve. Even if you take or put aside 35, 40% of the net profit that you make, there'll be so much money. That I was working on these figures the other day, that each child would have in his account at least between 4 to 6 million ringgit. That's a lot of money. It's not a question about making money. This is money for the future. Because we don't have much oil reserve here. And it was what was playing in my mind. But the government didn't listen to me at that time. And now when the oil price suddenly spiked to what it was after Russia invaded Ukraine, I thought this is an opportunity for us to hive off some of the profit oil for this purpose. But with the proviso that it's going to be very difficult for the government to treat it as a piggy bank. So the money is going to be locked up, used for the purposes for which I've already enumerated just now. Now, it's not just thinking about dollars and cents, it's thinking about the future of the people. Now you see, we have allocated billions of dollars for vaccine, which is not even a vaccine. It's only for emergency use. And we don't have the money. Why don't we have the money? But we made so much money from oil previously. These are windfall. It's not because of our blood and sweat. It's a windfall that God has granted this rich to us, or richness to us. And similarly now, He's telling us again that you have an opportunity to save this money for the future. So why not do it? It's not thinking of having money for you or for me. And if you have money, you can go into research. How much have we gone into all the products that we use or produce in Malaysia? We have not done enough research. On rubber, we went to England to let them research for us. Why should they? Why can't we do it? We have the capabilities of doing it in many other areas too, or even areas they're doing. Why can't we do it here? We can bring the expertise to Malaysia to teach our people or to train our people to go into matters that will be of interest to us or strategic interest to us. That's what I'm after. Thank you.
Thank you, Tengku. Terence.
Yes, thank you. Aisha, that was an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. The purpose of this forum today is, as I said earlier, the beginning of a series of forums we are going to have to discuss precisely this issue. Now, let me correct myself here on one point I made here. I used the word NGOs. The word I should use is civil society. It's a broader term, because I totally agree with you with these NGOs. There are many of them, and there's also the problem of getting them to work together. But let's...
The NGOs need to be regulated.
Yes, I agree. So there are a lot of problems also on that side.
Two-member NGO.
That's right. Who regulates the NGOs? Very good points you have made. So I like to use the broader word, civil society. When the MACC incident broke, there was an outpouring of protest. And the protest came from many, even I was taken aback by from where all these protests were coming from. The media took it up. It was well debated in the media. There were a lot of public discussions on the MACC crisis. It went viral. If you look at the social media, you look at YouTube, they were discussing it at length. They were saying that this is enough. We really now are at a crisis point. If even the MACC is now being questioned. There were demonstrations, and you saw how the police came out strong to stop the demonstrations. This is what I meant when I said by civil movement, civil society-driven movement, which is not, should be just NGOs, civil society broadly speaking, where people come together to make a statement. It happened, we saw it during the MACC. I was very concerned when the Johor state election was announced because I thought that this would distract attention from the MACC, and it did. It did. And unfortunately now it seems to have gone down. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen now after this. But subsequent to that, I have had discussions with young people. They have come to see me. Their disappointment that the movement that started, which was so vibrant in early January, seems to have dissipated. And we have lost that possibility of now really acting on corruption. And I reminded them of the milk tea movement. Please read up on the milk tea movement. The milk tea movement, you will see it in many parts of Asia, led by young people too, and using social media. Twitter doesn't involve reading lots of books as I'm proposing. Twitter, short messages, going viral very quickly, mobilizing people, putting a lot of pressure on the politicians to act. And I said that milk tea movement was very interesting in terms of what we saw in holding authoritarian regimes accountable. We saw it in Myanmar, we saw it in Thailand, we saw it in Hong Kong. That was not driven by NGOs. That was a civil society type movement. Now, there are many ways civil society can act. I'm not going to say that I have the answers. I don't. Some people may say they have to form a political party and enter mainstream politics because NGOs have been saying this for so long and they have not been effective. I do strongly support that view too. There are many ways in which we can act. But what I am saying is, what we need to do is, we need to have a serious discussion of how we are going to take this forward to deal with this corruption issue. We can't wait till the next election. That's not the way. We do it now. We develop strategies to put pressure, and I agree totally with what Tengku Razaleigh said, political will. The leadership, the Prime Minister must act. How do we put the pressure on the politician, the cabinet, the Prime Minister to act on this? So that's what we're going to try and do over the next, I'm hoping that we can take this forward, but that is our plan, to build on this movement that we saw emerging in January, which inspired a lot of people, that there was pressure on the Prime Minister to act. I can tell you, I think the Prime Minister and the leaders probably thought this thing will go away. Huh? Just give it some time, it'll go away. But it didn't go away, you know. It came up in December, and it carried on well into January, and it was still there, to the point that the cabinet had to make a statement on this, get the SC to act on this. There was pressure, a lot of pressure. That was good, but it dissipated. We lost the momentum. How do we regain that momentum so that we can build on what was started? That's what this forum is also about.
Thanks, Terence, for that. So we have another some time for another 1 or 2 questions. If there's anyone from the floor or online would like to ask any questions. Okay, otherwise, I will move on with just now, based on what Terence has mentioned and also Aisha mentioned about the role of the NGOs. Tengku, I would like to ask your view. NGOs, are they friends or enemy for the politicians?
You want me to answer?
Yes.
Definitely they are friends. They are definitely friends. But they must be genuine NGOs, not somebody who came up for a donation. And because they've got 2 members in their organization, they feel because they can argue their case strongly and convincingly, and they can walk away with doing nothing. But what we need is not just NGOs, but we also need a strong public opinion. That is a problem in our society. There's no strong public opinion. The newspapers are not doing their work. Neither are the social medium. They're not doing what is expected of them, so that they'll lend pressure to the public in order to pressure those in power to do things. Not just the government, but even agencies that supply electricity, that supplies. You must put pressure on them so that they will be more efficient. And this is a thing that I think they must be courageous enough to go forward and must be telling off these people to do it.
Yeah.
Don't wait until they get caught and get their head chopped off.
Okay. Well, linking to that, actually, I have a follow-up questions to Tengku and also Terence about the role of youth in Malaysian politics. Just now, Tengku, you mentioned about public opinions, about media. I think the youth in today's world consume a lot of social media, the news. However, there's also a lot of discussions about the Malaysian politics, the directions of Malaysian politics have contributed to the political fatigue among the youth as well. And there's a distrust of our politicians, with one of the reasons being the practice of corruptions and many others. So how can you convince or gain back their trust in our systems? If, let's say, from, I will move to Terence from the academic point of views later, but how about the politicians' point of views in terms of how do you gain the youth to trust our system? Because just now Terence also mentioned about our messy political system.
Very difficult to answer this. How do you regain trust? It's just like a ringgit. Why do you trust a piece of paper that's worth nothing? But because you believe that there is a backing to that ringgit, and you trust it. You take out $1, and everybody who accepts that dollar currency note believes that it has got the strength of the dollar and will pay for what you want to buy. That's a measure of trust. But I'm not talking about ringgit or about a currency note. I'm talking about leadership. I'm talking about performance. That people must believe in you. Must believe you. As you believe in God, you believe in the faith that you practice or you observe. And if you don't have that, then you're worthless. Do I explain myself?
Yes, however, what are the actions that you think we can take to really gain their trust apart from, we say they have to believe in the systems. However, there are so many things that happens in Malaysia that has caused the negative perceptions among the youth. So it is rather quite a challenge. So apart from, but leadership, just now Terence also mentioned about our political systems, our electoral systems, so there are so many things to actually to be fixed. Is there any one solutions that you think we can come up with or something?
I have no one solution for so many problems. And they're of varied forms. But I just give you one example.
Yeah.
Why I believe that there's unity in our society. Although people say it's polarized. You have a daughter, you have a son, they go to school, you
Yes.
feel they're safe. They come back home, unmolested, undisturbed, because you believe in the system. And the people have faith in not wanting to do things that will mar or make others very angry with them. So this is faith. This is faith. And that you can live and share space together, environment together. So it's just a question of belief and faith.
Okay.
Similarly with what I just mentioned just
All
now.
right. Okay. Thank you, Tengku. Terence.
Yeah, thank you. Again, another very difficult question, political fatigue. How do we respond to this? I agree, there's no one answer. So let me give you a few answers. The level of dysfunctionality that now prevails in the political system is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. Whether it's Barisan Nasional or opposition, the parties, the way in which they are functioning is so dysfunctional. This is why we have this fatigue. There's a need for soul searching to go on by these parties as to why they have brought this country to this point. There's no soul searching going on as far as I can see within these parties. They're not even questioning themselves as to why there's this fatigue and this distrust with them and the entire political system. It doesn't matter now whether it's opposition or Barisan. It's the same.
Right.
So that's why there is this fatigue. And then this useless by-elections constantly being held when we have no time for by-elections is a waste of money. That money must go into economic reforms. That's why there's this fatigue. So what is the answer? How do we, as you put it, regain trust? It comes back to the point of the person who is leading the government. We have said this before many a time. First, start with real reforms. Real reforms. Devolution of power to the institutions. Make them totally independent. Second, do something about the gerrymandering and the malapportionment. Change the whole way in which we run our elections. Make the elections fair. Introduce the Political Financing Act. If you introduce the Political Financing Act, that itself goes a far way. You have institutional reforms, you've made money politics now less of a problem, you've devolved power to the institutions so that there are real checks and balances in the system. Change this useless GLC system, which is a serious waste of resources we don't have. They refuse to change it. That's at the state level and that's at the federal level. They can do this tomorrow. Tomorrow they can do it. Everything that I said, they can do tomorrow. But they don't want to do it. This is why we have to put the pressure. Civil society must put the pressure now. Enough is enough. You can do it now. So I feel that there are solutions, and these solutions can be implemented soon, because we must address the fundamental issue at hand. The country is in a crisis. We are confronted with an economic crisis. We need very good public policies. We need politicians who are sitting in cabinet who are thinkers, who know how to deal with these problems. Are our cabinet members thinkers who have great ideas how to solve it? And what of the bureaucracy? And meanwhile, the education system, the point was raised, the education system is in a mess. Where are all the actions? It can be done.
Thank
We
you.
can start, we have to start soon.
Sure. Thank you, Terence. Now have one question from the back.
Well, it might not be a question. My name is Siti Kasim. It's probably just a statement. I'm so glad. Actually, I wanted to ask something or say something, but Professor Terence already actually answered what I wanted to say. In which actually we need a courageous political leader, a very courageous leader. Now, none of the political parties are willing to change anything right now, okay, because it benefits them, whether it's the government or opposition. All political parties, they have to follow their political warlords. So that's why we need to educate our voters that when you elect your member of parliament, meaning your representative to Parliament, you do not actually select based on their logos. You actually elect the person who will be courageous enough to actually say the things that you need to be said in Parliament and change the policies that we have right now. We have a serious systemic problem in this country, as Professor Terence has already mentioned. He covered it very well. And if we do not have the right member of parliaments in the next GE, I can guarantee you in 2 terms, Malaysia will be a failed state. That is for sure. So we need to actually turn it around. And also just to touch on Tengku Razalegh's mention about us need to be more courageous, speaking up about our rights and things like that, to be more knowledgeable. But the problem in our country is that our politicians and our government agencies, they use the laws against us. For example, the MACC debacle. I mean, the journalists instead being investigated by the police, but not the person who has been accused of being corrupted. What is this? You know, I mean, it is always the reverse, the situation. Instead of the person who was supposed to be investigated, they investigate the person who reported it. And this is quite common. It happens every time. Why is that? Why is that? They want to intimidate us. They want to actually oppress us. And this is why we need to have courageous leaders that will stand up for us in Parliament, not those cowards that actually will not say things which will affect their vote bank. So this is why we need to change the mindset. And I just feel that Malaysia is at the brink of death, and I'm very worried for Malaysia. This is why we need to change our mindset when we go to the voting booth next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Tengku, would you have anything you would like to respond to the statement? No? Terence? No? Oh, we have one more last questions. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tan Boon Han from a first-year student in Faculty of Economics. So, my question is to Mr. Tengku Razaleigh. Because just now during your statement, you opposed to what Mr. Gomez said about the political funding law and suggested you implement a tax on, but you didn't further explain how the tax shall be done, whether should it be a tax on income tax or a tax on corporate tax. If it is a tax on corporate tax, it goes back to the square point where big businesses are funding our political campaigns and leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry for not explaining to you in detail what I had in mind while elaborating on Dr. Gomez's proposal on political funding. I agree with it, but it's just that my feeling is that if you don't want people with vested interest to put money in your fund for political purposes, then you should cut them out. And therefore, you should impose a tax on persons or on citizens. Say $1 per head. Probably that's too little for the amount that we need to have finance political activities. Maybe $10 per head. I mean, you can go on talking about this, but what I'm saying is a meaningful amount. And only once every election you do that, or before each general election. Then that money will be allocated depending on the size of the political party concerned and on the reach it has to the voters or the constituents, whether nationwide or constituency-wide, depending on how active such political parties are, will then enable you to cut off this link between a businessman who wants to make money and may even try to corrupt you in order to favor them by giving you some money. So we want to cut that off. So if you get this money from taxes or levy of sort, then at least this money is not going to influence you one way or the other, either your party or yourself. And the money is used for your political activity. That's what I was trying to differentiate between political funding, funded by people who have got interest in what the government is doing, and funding that comes out from people who willingly pay for your activity as a levy or as a tax. That's a differentiation. Then the details, I think we can work it out. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tengku. So, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we have come towards the end of our forum today. But before I close the sessions, I would just like to pass to the two invited speakers for a very short concluding wrap-up statements for today. Just 30 seconds or a minute on the topics today. Terence, would you like to start?
My only conclusion is that I hope that this sparks a new round of momentum where people come together to take a strong stand on corruption. That's what the purpose of this forum was today. And we're going to build on this. And I hope to have your support, including those who are listening, that we begin this momentum again so that we can bring an end or begin this momentum again to curb corruption in this country.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Terence.
Dr. Khoo.
Tengku, one last short concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. I think it's given me an opportunity to say what I think I should say under these very controversial topics. But on the MACC, I think the people running MACC must be prepared to be criticized if they are performing public functions. From the king right down, they must be prepared to be criticized by members of the public, as they are also paid by the members of the public in the performance of their duty. And therefore, they should not even try to react by taking legal action against those people who criticize them. It is the action of an informed citizen who takes such an action against public officials. And I hope we will be able to really seriously go into this subject about corruption. And I think we should start not only from school, but from homes. I think the upbringing is very important. If you do not look after your children from small to behave, and starts with taking other people's things, then it becomes a habit. And when they become a habit, they get very greedy. When they get very greedy, it's going to be very difficult to control them. And I remember my late mother always stopped me from taking things belonging to my brother, for instance. And I always get cane on my arm, on my palm, for trying to be greedy, for trying to take what is not mine. I think one or two things like this will go a long way and will teach you to behave. And probably you can't discipline everybody, but it does help. And it will go a long way to discipline society. So start with the children, start with the schools, and perhaps we may be able to save the situation from getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the organizer, let's say thanks again to Tengku Razaleigh and Dr. Terence for the informative and interesting talk, and to the audience, all of you, for your active participation. Let's give them a round of applause. So I'll now pass the sessions to the Master of Ceremony, Kevin, and to conclude this evening. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, test. Okay, I hope everyone had a fruitful evening. On behalf of Agora Society, I would like to once again thank everyone for coming, and thank you to our, our guests, Dr. Khoo, Tengku, and Professor. This is our, it's a long time we haven't had, an event in, besides the virtual one. So this will be the first of many events to come. So please follow our Facebook, and then stay tuned. We will conduct more events like this in the coming future, right? And we still have the venue until 11. So if you would like to stay back and then have a cup of coffee or tea and mingle around, please feel free. Otherwise, I hope everyone stays safe and take care and have a good evening and good night. And one more thing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Rasuah Busters, our event partner for this event. Thank you very much. Have a good evening and good night.